AM560.com, on the AM560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. This is some interesting data. The percentage of 12th graders who have a driver's license have ever tried alcohol.
Have what?
Ever tried alcohol. Ever go on dates. Worked for pay at all during the school year. Looking over 40 years from like 76 to 16. 1976 to 2016. The percentage of 12th graders, so high school seniors, had a driver's license, tried alcohol, go on dates, work for pay. All of those things have declined significantly. Have a driver's license, tried alcohol, dated, they were all north of 85% of 12th graders in 1976. By the end of the continuum here, 2016, fewer than 75% had a driver's license. Fewer than 65% had tried alcohol. Fewer than 60% had dated ever. And just under 55%, so a little more than half, had worked at all for pay during the school year. What do you? I wonder what you attribute that to. What does that say about our culture?
Well, I can tell you, as a mother of boys with the whole Me Too movement are so afraid to ask girls out on dates because if they look at them wrong, they're afraid they'll be accused of something.
Yeah, but it was declining well before that. I mean, it went from north of 90%, north of 85%, I should say, in the mid-90s to under 75% by the first few years of this century. Well, it's just interesting. I mean, it seems like this is not just boys. This is boys and girls. So all 12th graders. 2019 paper on the topic. It just seems like young people are less independent, or certainly at an early age, in their teenage years. I mean, you're talking about even as they enter into young adulthood, they're just less independent. Is that a problem? For more on that topic and others related to the development of young people, please be joined again by Dr. Leonard Sax, the author of Boys Adrift, the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. We got a lot to talk about with Dr. Sax. Dr. Sax, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
What about that? Looking at seniors, high school seniors, and seeing such a significant drop-off over 4 decades in those 12th graders that have a driver's license, have ever dated, have ever worked for pay. I mean, it's still a majority, but it's a smaller majority.
Well, specifically regarding boys asking girls out, I've visited over 400 schools over the last 22 years. I've met with a lot of boys across the United States, and I've asked them about this, and they're pretty blunt. They'd rather look at screens. They'd rather look at porn. And I've talked to deans at high schools who says our biggest problem is the boys don't want to show up. We've had a school dance at this school for 100 years, but the boys don't turn out anymore. The girls are dancing with other girls because there's no boys, and we're thinking we're just going to phase it out. And we ask the boys, why don't you want to ask a girl out to the dance? And they're like, the girls online are way prettier. So, the porn and the screens and the video games are a major factor that's diverting boys' motivation away from the real world.
But how are we going to get boys off of their screens?
Okay, so I wrote another. You mentioned my book, Boys Adrift, which absolutely is all about this. But then I read another book called The Collapse of Parenting, which was a New York Times bestseller, because the parents have to take the lead here. You can't expect boys in this culture, and by this culture I mean the culture of Bruno Mars, Drake, Cardi B, and Megan Thee Stallion. You can't expect boys in this culture to say, oh, I'm going to be virtuous and I'm going to refrain from looking at porn even though all my friends are. It's just not realistic. You have to limit, govern, and guide what your son is doing with his screens.
You wrote a piece recently about boys' schools, all boys' schools, that is, and whether or not that could be part of the answer to boys falling behind academically in terms of the grades they get in high school, the percentage of boys that go on to post-secondary education as compared to girls.
Yeah.
Done.
So what boys need to get excited about education is very different from what girls need to get excited about education. In this country, we deploy what I call the middle-class script. The middle-class script is work hard at high school, get into college, work hard at college, get a good job, have a good life. That doesn't work. It does not motivate boys. Because boys who are perfectly content with their video games and their pornography, it's not going to work. You need to create a completely different culture where it's cool for a boy to be a gentleman and a scholar. And I saw that firsthand at this school in Dallas, where I have now visited on 8 days on 4 different trips over the last 12 years, the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy, where they really have taken this to heart and have created a school where boys are proud to earn an A, to win points for their team. And you have boys from low-income households demanding more books to read in their spare time. And the school's done extremely well, way outpacing basically every other school in the district and in the top 10% across the state of Texas on the state tests, despite the fact that more than 80% of these kids come from low-income households, qualify for free student lunches. Now, I emphasize just putting boys in a building without girls accomplishes nothing good and often leads to catastrophe. Teachers have to be trained in how you lead a boys' classroom. It's very different from a co-ed classroom. I can tell you about lots of schools that have failed miserably because they thought all they had to do was build a school without girls and good things would happen. That's not what happens. But that school did their homework, and they've had very good outcomes now over the past 12 years.
Ironically entitled Barack Obama Academy. But anyway, so what's happening there? So I read the piece of the competition. They're separated into houses, and you compete.
House competition.
Yeah,
yes.
you compete. But going back to what you said before about building men of character, turning young men into young gentlemen. I mean, so it's not just competition; it also has to be character formation needs to be part of that competition. I guess maybe, right?
Yeah, the school leaders have to have a very clear understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. It's not primarily about grades and test scores. It's about becoming a better man, and they have advisories where men talk to boys about what does it mean to be a good man. Does a good man look at porn? Does a good man spend his free time playing video games? And it's really eye-opening because the boys are coming from a culture, the culture of popular American culture, where, all the boys look at porn and all the boys spend their free time playing video games. And so you've got to have men coming in and saying, no, actually, becoming a better man means you find something better to do with your time than look at porn.
Wow. So you also wrote another article about politics and parenting, that children of liberal parents are more likely to be depressed. Can you explain how that works?
That's a remarkable finding. So, we've had scholars like Jean Twenge who've been studying kids over the past decades and seeing who's more likely to be depressed. And so a very robust finding in this research is that girls are more likely to be depressed than boys are. That's been true for as long as anyone's been studying this issue, going back many decades. But recently, they've discovered something new, which is that the children of left-of-center parents are more likely to be depressed than the children of right-of-center parents. And it's now such a big effect that boys who are the sons of left-of-center parents are more likely to be depressed than girls who are the daughters of right-of-center parents. In other words, the effect of the parents' politics is now greater than the effect of whether you happen to be a boy or a girl. And that's something new, and it's a big effect. And so in my article on this topic, I explored the various conjectures as to why this may be so. And I think the most persuasive argument is that left-of-center parents tend to be more permissive. Left-of-center parents tend to say, well, I think good parenting means letting kids decide. And the problem with that is if you let kids decide, you end up with a lot of kids who are spending a lot of time on social media. And social media clearly is a major driver of depression for teenage kids. Right-of-center parents are more likely to say, no, actually, I'm going to limit what you do with your device, and I think I have that authority as a parent. Left-of-center parents are now less comfortable exercising their authority. Now, I've been a family doctor for over 30 years, and I can tell you that as recently as 20 years ago, that difference really wasn't there. Left-of-center parents were very comfortable being authoritative parents and laying down the law. But that's much less true today. That's changed. And left-of-center parents are now often into what they call gentle parenting, which means you never say no. The child is always right. Because if you say no, then you're being authoritarian and you must be a Republican. So that's something new that I've observed in my own practice and that researchers are documenting nationwide, that left-of-center parents are now uncomfortable doing their job as parents.
Have you studied left-of-center parents who let their kids do a gap year, which then turns into 2 years, which then turns into 3 years?
No, I don't know of good research that looks at that intersection between there's actually only a handful of good studies looking at the politics of the parents and outcomes, and I'm not aware that any of them looked at the gap year. There is a growing proportion of young people, boys more than girls, who are adrift, and that, of course, is the focus of my book, Boys Adrift, although we're seeing a lot of girls adrift as well.
So, such a small percentage of boys or girls go to all boys. Let's just focus on boys for a second. Go to all boys schools. And so for the parents that have their son in the standard issue neighborhood government school, what's the advice and counsel you give to make sure that they don't end up adrift?
Yeah. So you want to make sure your son is attending a boy-friendly school. And a co-ed school can be friendly to boys without disengaging girls. And so you're moving to a new neighborhood. You want to know, is this school that my son is slated to attend, is that going to be a good choice for him? Some very simple metrics. If it's a high school, go and see what proportion of the kids earning honors last year were boys. Look at the dean's list, the honor roll. It should be roughly 50-50, but increasingly in the United States, at a growing proportion of schools, we find that girls greatly outnumber the boys. So looking nationwide, we do have national data on who's the valedictorian at American high schools, and girls now outnumber boys by 3 to 1. And when you look at the boys who are the valedictorians, those boys tend to be immigrants from East Asia, South Asia. White, black, and Latino boys in this country increasingly regard doing well at school as something that girls do, because schools become unfriendly to boys. Another good question is snowballs. Is the throwing of snowballs permitted? I attended public schools in Ohio, K through 12, and I grew up outside Cleveland. We got a lot of snow, lake effect snow, and during the winter months, recess and lunch, we'd put on our coats and go outside and throw snowballs at each other, and the teachers would join us. I remember Mr. Albers was a great shot. He'd get you right between the eyes every time, students against teachers. Not anymore. Today, 2 kids start throwing snowballs at each other on school property, and teacher comes out and says, "What are you guys doing? Not allowed to do that. You got to wait till after school and go somewhere else. No throwing of snowballs allowed on school property." And the unintended message the boys are getting is that I'm not welcome here. Boys doing things that boys have always done, throwing snowballs, pointing fingers at each other, saying, "Bang, bang, you're dead," drawing a picture of a weapon, now gets you in trouble. That's what I mean when I say that many schools have become unfriendly to boys, and it accomplishes nothing. Because that boy who gets in trouble because he drew a picture of a rifle He's not going to turn into a boy who loves scrapbooking and talking about his feelings. He's going to say, school sucks. I'm going to go home and play Grand Theft Auto, where I get rewarded for killing people. So the lack of awareness of these differences pushes boys away from school. So you got to ask around and see what's the story with this particular school. There's plenty of schools out there that are friendly to boys. You might have to move. My wife and I moved from Montgomery County, Maryland to Chester County, Pennsylvania, because we were unhappy with the choice of schools available in Montgomery County, Maryland, the People's Republic of Maryland.
Yeah, right. Right, and we know the feeling. Yeah, wow, I love the snowball test. That's really good.
Yeah.
Dr. Leonard Sax, he is the author of bestsellers Boys Adrift and many others. And Dr. Sax, we thank you for joining us again. Appreciate your insights.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
To say he lived an interesting life is an understatement. Father Dwight Longnecker is a Catholic convert with a fascinating story. And Saturday, October 21st, he's coming to